Picking up where we left off. Big trouble in Banff. Having a major city only an hour away is not something Parks Canada could have done anything about, but did it have to allow so many ski resorts for the Calgarians? And what about the town of Banff? It sought and got autonomy in 1990, negotiating a secession from the national park that lets the city lease the ground beneath itself from Parks Canada for a paltry $550,000 a year. That's $6 a month per resident for the privilege of living and making money, sometimes lots of money, in the park. Tourists dumped $710 million there in 1995. That's an average of more than $100,000 per resident. Parks Canada regulations say the only people allowed to live in the park are those who provide essential and basic services to visitors. In Banff, these services include a Hard Rock Cafe, a McDonald's, and selling Pierre Cardin neckties. The town has a shopping mall, real estate agencies, some of which advertise in Japanese, and disco music pumping from the bars on Main Street. It has a skateboard palace. Even the tourists get overwhelmed. We can buy that at a Walmart, one woman tells her companion, as they dodge elbows among the trinkets in a souvenir shop. There's a Walmart here, isn't there? Where did we see a Walmart? There is no Walmart in Banff, but it looks like the kind of place where you might find one. That's something that really irks Brian Horesi. I'm mispronouncing that, but you just have to go with me. A respected independent conservation biologist from Calgary. The bear population has virtually no hope, he says. The Walmart mentality and grizzly bears cannot coexist in the same place. That's probably true. I can't stand either. There are somewhere between 80 and 100 resident grizzlies in Banff National Park. A small number that many scientists say is just getting smaller, one that reflects the larger problem of disappearing bear habitat in southern Alberta. And the bears that mauled the Lake Louise campers on September 24th, 95, were not residents, nor were the bears that rangers killed after the attack. Those bears weren't the ones that attacked the campers. The plot thickens. Nobody would figure this out for a while, though. We feel confident these were the bears involved, said Sheila Louie, Park spokeswoman at the time of the mauling. Then, 6 months later, Park Superintendent Charlie Zinkin acknowledged that they were the wrong bears. DNA tests had shown the guilty bear and her cub had been taken to an area north of Golden, British. Superintendent Charlie Zinkin acknowledged they were the wrong bears. DNA tests had shown the guilty bear and her cub had been taken to an area north of Golden, British Columbia, fitted with radio collars and released. Lucky for the people in Golden. By the end of 1997, they hadn't returned to Banff. The mistake may be understandable since both sets of bears were captured near the Lake Louise campground the day after the attack, and both previously had been released near Banff after being captured in the Revelstoke, British Columbia area, where they became addicted to human food at the dump, still unfenced at the time. And a necropsy on the innocent bears, the ones that died, showed the mother was severely undernourished, even though 1995 had been a good year for natural foods. It's possible she had lost weight after her relocation, wandering lost in an unfamiliar ecosystem and burning up more calories than she could find. She'd been relocated. The guilty bears had been released just outside the park's western border. They worked their way to Lake Louise, and by the time they arrived, they were in the condition known as hyperphagia, a desperate, single-minded quest for pre-hibernation calories that often leads bears to trouble. That's to be at lunchtime. There they wandered in an unfamiliar place where they didn't know where to find natural foods, so the bears applied the knowledge they had picked up at Revelstoke Humans often mean food. The Banff dump had been long closed, but the campground was still busy, and to a bear's nose, no matter how clean you keep a place with that many people, a lot of enticing odors remain. It's a scenario that was repeated many times in Yellowstone in the 60s and 70s. After the dumps were closed there, bears that depended on garbage may become dangerously aggressive when they can't find the garbage anymore. And when bears become aggressive, they often don't live long. Horace, the independent biologist, blames bear managers for the incident. You can't blame a bear for being hungry and following its nose, he says. Excuse me. Everything about the relocation was wrong, Horace says. They were moved late in the year and were dumped into a strange ecosystem. It was a female with a cub. You can't think of a more stressful time to relocate a bear than in the fall, when it should be just fattening up. It doesn't know any of the food sources and is presumably crossed into the park. Horace isn't alone. There had been a handful of bear incidents in the campground in days previous to the attack. A bear had chased a bicyclist. One had knocked over a barbecue at a nearby residence. One had knocked over an unoccupied tent a couple of weeks earlier, and one had ripped into an empty tent just a day or two before the attack. Banff Chief Warden Bob Haney said at the time that there are always bears around Lake Louise, and the incidents hadn't been numerous enough to warrant closing the campground. Hereford, the Australian, said if he had known of the earlier incidents, he probably wouldn't have stayed in the campground. Susan Olin, one of the Glacier Park Rangers, told reporters at the time that she had no reason to second-guess the wardens. A year later, she changed her mind and sued the Canadian government. A naturalist who worked summers explaining Glacier to tourists, Olin was good at her job, her colleagues in the National Park Service say, but she found it incredibly difficult to go back to work in bear country the following summer. She's wising up. Glacier has lots of grizzlies, and if you spend much time outdoors there, you will see them. Olin was no longer comfortable doing this kind of work. She changed some of her duties due to her lack of comfort on the trail, Glacier spokeswoman Amy Vanderbilt says. Parks Canada knew or ought to have known that the bear represented a danger to campers, Olin's lawsuit says, adding that the agency should have closed the campground or at least given explicit warnings to campers there instead of the stranded admonition that everyone receives at the campground gate. Glacier naturalists receive extensive grizzly bear training, learning how to conduct themselves safely in bear country and how to pass that knowledge on to others. Much of it can be boiled down to two words: avoid grizzlies. Because of that training, Olin would not have stayed in the campground if she had known bears were attacking tents there, her suit says. The attack meant Olin needed surgery, physical therapy, and counseling. She suffers from nightmares and doesn't sleep well. The emotional and psychological distress takes its toll. She suffers from fatigue, loss of energy, and loss of stamina and strength, along with continuing physical problems in her back, arm, and shoulder. Her face is scarred. She has had to give up hiking and camping. Her heightened fearfulness and anxiety of bears following the attack means a probable loss of income, according to the suit. She wants the Canadian government to pay at least $62,000 plus legal fees, expenses, and damages for future loss of income. The suit was unresolved when this book went to press. At the time, Parks Canada was still refusing to talk about the incident, fearing anything officials might say could interfere with the court case. It wasn't the first such suit. In 1980, Swiss tourist Remy Tobler was badly mauled in Banff, losing an eye and some teeth. Ooh. He sued Parks Canada and won because the agency had announced that a bear that had killed a man a week earlier because the agency had announced that a bear that had killed a man a week earlier had been destroyed. That one was the wrong bear, too. That's 10 minutes. We'll leave it there. Love you. God bless.